Patch 13.19 had a lot of changes, just not for support. More importantly, Renata got a prestige skin and I'm suddenly a Renata main. Pike got buffed this patch with his health growth increasing and his W cooldown decreasing at higher ranks. Ronduin's is now 300 gold cheaper, and I think if you play tank supports, you should add this to the possibility of items you can build. That was all the support related changes. Here's my 13.19 support tier list. Not a lot has changed since my last list, but I did move around some champs. I always cover A and above, but someone commented if I could do the B section, so we'll go ahead and cover that. If you're interested in A and above, check out my last tier list. Kicking off B, we have Ashe. Even with Umbral being good, she is struggling in this meta. I think because Engage is super strong, it's hard for her to get a good matchup, and even in the matchup she does well in, she just gets outscaled. Although her damage is weak, her utility is what makes her a decent champion. Players that have good game sense can make it very hard for the enemy jungler and team to play. Compared to other support mages, Lux is very okay. Her all-in potential on a support budget is decent, and her harass compared to the other higher tier supports is mediocre. Xerath and Zyra do her job a lot better in most aspects, except for being able to shield your allies. While Lux does very well into most enchanters, she is hard countered by most hook champs, which are very meta right now. Renata is an amazing pick in certain scenarios, but she needs a decent amount of setup for her to be good. She is great when the enemy team has a heavy dive comp and you have more than one auto-based champion, but if she doesn't have this type of setup, she is okay. In solo queue, you aren't going to get a lot of teams that will draft based off your pick, so even though I think she is S tier in certain situations, she is B overall. Also, allies need to learn how to play with her W. It's so annoying when you W someone and they run away. Heimerdinger is one of the hardest counter to all hook champs because of his ability to block them with his turrets. He's a great counter and a decent blind since people play him in other lanes. Heimer has a lot going for him, but I think overall he's pretty okay. If he doesn't get ahead in lane or if he doesn't have a hard counter, playing him on a support budget feels bad. Heimer is good at zoning and good against all ins, but if he plays against an enchanter, they can just sit back and outscale him. Leona is one of the tankiest engaged support champs with lots of CC, but she is weak in that she does not have a lot of range, mobility, and her lockdown is unreliable. The higher tier engaged supports all have most of these things over her. While Leona is one of the strongest champions in the mid game, she falls off because it's hard to be the main take on a support budget. She has good matchups into hook champs and some melees, but struggles against champions that can outrange her and outmaneuver her. I used to have Annie support pretty high on my tier list, but after the nerfs to her Q and E, I moved her down to B. She is a hybrid enchanter mage that enables her carries and can burst enemies on her own. Like most mages, when she's ahead, she feels great, and honestly, even when behind, she's pretty decent. Currently though, I think Annie struggles a lot into the meta champs, and she can't stat check them like she used to. Amumu used to be a really strong support, but he got a lot of nerfs, and one of his core items, Even Shroud, got nerfed as well, leaving him in the middle of B tier. He has a lot of range and guaranteed lockdown, but it's not enough to make up for his lack of stats. Like most hook champs, he counters most range supports, but I would only really play him if you're against double range bot and your team has a lot of AP damage, as his passive converts magic damage to true damage. Xerath used to be the best mage support until Riot changed his passive to be more farming oriented. On top of this change, he has gotten a lot of nerfs, so he is not as strong as he used to be. He is still one of the best counters to a lot of the enchanters. He is an okay blind because people play him mid, but a lot of the meta supports counter him. I think Xerath is a pretty honest character, as he can be OP if you can land all of his abilities. B is for Braum. While I do think Braum could be an A, I think he needs a lot of setup and a bit more coordination from your team to be good in a solo queue environment. He is one of the best picks into most, if not all, hook champs. While he does win hard when picked as a counter, if you pick him blind, he can also be one of the most useless champs. I think he functions very similarly to Taric, but he's a lot further down in the list just because he needs more setup. Nautilus was a high tier support earlier in the season, but when they nerfed Even Shroud, he became pretty mediocre. While he does well into range supports, he is currently weak stats wise, and if he falls behind, he struggles to survive in team fights. I think there are a lot of counters that are super meta at the moment, like Rel, Alistar, and Taric, that make it feel really bad for him to play. He does really well into drafts where you need to lock down a champion or need hard engage, but I think he is a better counter than a blind. Karma got some nice buffs in 13.16, but she still has the problem of win lane lose game. She has all the tools to always win lane, but as soon as you make one mistake, you fall behind super hard. Even though she's always had this problem, I think she is actually in her current best state, and I'd honestly be okay with putting her in A. She does well into most support matchups because of her range on Mantra Q, but she struggles against hook champs. Finally, at the top of the list, I have Nami. Like Karma, I would totally be okay with putting her in A because I feel like after her buff, she's in a good spot. I am a little biased though, since I have played a lot of Nami. With her great CC, heals, and ability to buff her allies, she could fit in most comps, and I would even say she's a decent blind. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I feel like Nami is a mechanical champ that is a bit hard to play. Unfortunately, everyone in Season 13 flies across the map, so it's hard to play Nami well. If you can land your bubbles and position yourself well, she can provide a lot to a team. That concludes my 13.19 support solo queue tier list. Thank you so much for watching.